Yes.
Thank you. All right, so starting over, what is the accelerator? Okay. So, and this is straight from Chris's mouth to slides here. So it's a standing network of lots of different types of scientists, more than just psychological folks, who volunteer research resources. So that's often your participant pool, or you can donate money, you can donate your technical expertise, which is how I never leave the Slack, which is what just went off probably. But some sort of resource to a project. And these projects are, we'll talk about the selection procedures, they're refined, implemented, analyzed, one of them so far, and then sent out through a democratic process. So people get the chance to vote on different parts of the procedure, and including the network. So the network gets to choose what it wants to work on. Okay. And so this is actually a SIPS product, sort of. It comes from if I remember the story correctly, a bicycle ride that Chris went on. So Chris Cartier, I'm going to butcher it just for fun, is our director. And several of us in here are on many projects, and ducks, and hopefully can best represent this crazy project. So also partners with a lot of stuff on Center for Open Science. So we put everything we do on OSF. And so I wanted to give a context of when we started, and so this is about 3 years running, almost, give another couple months. And the idea is to build sort of this like CERN for psychology, building a place where people can get access to resources that they wouldn't before, and we can also provide researchers with resource skills that they maybe not have learned before. So I'm going to also have Jordan talk a little bit about CRAPE and how you can do this collaboratively with undergrads. And then there's a session right after this that you should also go to about doing PSA or CRAPE projects with undergrads. So plug my next session. And so these numbers may not be up to date, but it's at least over 1,000 researchers that have signed up, at least on our member website, and across probably about 600 labs and 72 countries. So it's a lot of different types of people who are involved, and we'd really love to get more representation from everywhere. I would say we're fairly US and Europe centric, but hopefully we could change that. Which is one reason why we're recording this, so that we can hit Asia, which is currently asleep. So a couple of core principles. So we really focus a lot on diversity and inclusion. Different types of people is generally the focus, because most psychological samples are weird, and we would like to de-weird them. So not Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. Am I getting this right? The co-hosts are nodding. Great. But also the researchers themselves. So having lots of different types of people run projects. It's decentralized. So the decisions are generally made by whoever is on the meeting that day, and then spread throughout the groups where people can debate. We have a very active Slack that you can join to help contribute to those conversations. Transparent in both operations and products. If you get on the Slack, you may never escape, where you can view a lot of the decisions and how they're made and debated, and then all of our stuff. So translation materials, study materials, the papers themselves are all posted on OSF. We do have a set of rules that we try to abide by. So each study has, I think, 10 or 12 PSA core principles and rules that we try to follow. And these include things like certain ways that we do translation, requiring registered reports. And so there is a list of things that we'll try to hit to make sure that we're doing this in the most rigorous way. And then there is an openness to criticism. So there are criticisms of this type of model, but also on the studies themselves. So we take feedback in lots of different ways. And Hannah has written, and many others have written, a really great paper that was published on this. So I've included the link to their preprint so that you can read more about the kind of principles and guiding practices. Oops. So how do I get involved? And so we're going to talk a little bit about the procedures, and then I'm going to let other people talk about the projects themselves. We have one completed project. This is lovingly named Study 1, which we'll talk about in a minute. 6 that are currently in progress, and several new studies that have been selected and are coming soon. Okay. There are committees, and at the very end we'll have several committee members from active committees that are looking for people to join them and who want to do some ongoing outreach. There's a member website which you can join, but very soon hopefully it'll switch to being something even more awesome, aka once we're done with SIPS and I have some more free time. There's a conference in September where we're going to have people talking about things like the brand new member website and the current progress of each study and how studies make decisions, so there's a way to actively get involved. I have the link for our Slack that you can join, or you can just donate. So there's all kinds of levels here. I could sign up simply on the mailing list, and you will get very long, sometimes short emails, all the way up to I never leave Slack, and it's always open. So there's a good, and the other good thing that I have always loved about this group, from my personal opinion, is the ability to drop out when you need to. So if you are having, it's the end of semester and it's finals and you're doing a bunch of grading, you can be like, peace, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Okay. So having a distributed network with lots of members and skills means that it allows you to choose how and when you contribute. All right, I'm gonna figure this out in a minute. So I'm gonna talk about the project life cycle, and then I'll let some of my co-hosts talk about the different projects that we have going. And so first thing that happens is there's some sort of submission. Okay, so the last round of submissions were in last September, and I wanted to talk kind of as an example about the face perception study. So there's a link to its OSF page with all of its materials and its registered report. This is the project that's done. Okay, so they're finishing up submitting the second round of the registered reports. Okay. And so when someone submits a study, the study selection committee will look over those studies and make a first pass decision on how and if studies are appropriate to send out for further review. So there's a desk reject kind of procedure. Most studies make it past this point because you've at least tried to format it correctly. Then reviewers are solicited, up to 10 for each study, and members are also given a chance to write reviews and make comments on studies. From that, the study selection committee picks studies that are feasible. So this feasibility part is really important, and that meet our criteria and are sort of appropriate, and then they get announced coming soon. So there are a couple of studies that should be announced fairly soon. The important part here is that there's feedback from expert reviewers on ethics, on methods, and on subject. So the reviewers are really a broad array of different types of people, but then there's also feedback from the network. And this is really great because it allows the network to tell you, like, none of us want to do this study, right? Or there's several times you'll get reviews that are like, well, this is cool, but our lab does social research. So yeah, it's cool, it's cognitive, and we can continue to have this social cognitive fight that I have in my head. No, really, I love all you social scientists, I promise. Okay. Once it gets selected, the study has support from a bunch of different committees. So there's an ethics committee that helps coordinate IRBs from all over the world. There's a translation committee who we cannot live without, and I'm super excited because we have Max here who's going to talk about the translation group for helping translate into many languages. Project monitoring obviously is very important, so they help nudge you along and keep you on track. A data and methods committee that's very active in helping you manage data, data release plans, how do we keep everything organized, code review, that kind of stuff. And then a funding group that helps look for funding to support member labs that maybe couldn't participate without paying subjects. And so it's kind of, once you get accepted, it's not like, it's like, good luck, we'll see you next week. There's lots of hand holding, and in a good way. And then the real important part to adhere to our open science principles is that we build this whole thing into a registered report. So I think all but one study has submitted a registered report, or at least some sort of pre-registered plan, and that really allows the members to also make comments. So if you join a study, you're going to look at this report at some point so that you can have a say. And people will talk about the methods. We'll recruit labs that can participate in the study. Those labs will turn in IRBs for the study. Once all of that kind of gets approved, we go through translation. And then authorship is also determined by using credit guidelines, which I have on a later slide. So the labs really have a say. You don't have to do much more than provide data and review the paper if you don't want to, but we really encourage labs to get actively involved. So comment on the study itself, right? Then once that kind of process goes through, now if you're doing a registered report, obviously this can take a long time. And so one thing that we'll talk about in the next session is if you're going to use these sort of studies for undergraduate classes, that's really great, but make sure you understand that new studies sometimes are very difficult to implement into a class because you never know how long that review process can take. And so I know for several of them that took much longer than expected and went through 3 or 4 rounds. So these run slower than you think, I think is the summary of the process. But once they get to that point, we implement them, right? And these are often implemented on a platform that works best. So one of the studies was running on Open Sesame, and we're now trying to switch it to new software so we can do it online. We're running our current COVID study on Form R. One of them is running on SOCI Survey, and then there's also Qualtrics. So this really allows the researchers to pick a platform that works best. Do you need reaction timing, or do you just need a survey? So there's no one set of standards here. And then our data collection labs are tracked. So as your lab submits data, you get to watch the data roll in. And you can use your lab's data for student projects or presentations. I'm gonna figure this out one day. Here we go. And then last, the data is analyzed within that pre-registered plan as part of the registered report or pre-registered project. And if it's a registered report, resubmitted for publication. One thing that we've really encouraged is secondary data set challenges. So we've only done one of these because there's only one project that's made it this far, where part of the data is released, people submit proposals for a secondary data set challenge, and then submit reports for those, and then they're given the whole data set. So we really use this as a way to also provide data for new questions and papers. And then the public data set release. And I think study 1 is like somewhere between these 2 points. I don't exactly remember where they've definitely had secondary data set challenge proposals that came with a little bit of money. And then I don't think they've released full data. I'm looking to see if anybody's nodding. There's a no. So we're getting to the point where they'll release the public data set once the registered report is totally finished. Right? And so that project's on FACES. All right, now I'm going to let Jeremy do all the talking about the 0203 bundle. And I think I have control of the slides, so you just have to tell me when you want to move on.
I'll let you know. So just to orient everybody, I want to walk through both study 2 and study 3, which are bundled together for the purpose of data collection convenience. We're basically just trying to get a little more bang from our buck for every participant. So every participant that completes this study does the entire procedure for both 002 and 003. So 002 is a cognitive study. It's looking at the role of mental simulation in language comprehension. Basically, when you're thinking about, when you read a sentence, the idea is that you form a little mental simulation of what is happening in that sentence. If you read the sentence, the man hammered the nail, excuse me, into the wall, you form a little mental picture of that, right? And then what they do is they show you a picture of a nail, and sometimes the nail is pointing straight up, or it's either vertical or horizontal. And because you have this mental picture of hammering a nail into a wall, if you get the vertical nail, you have a little mental slowdown, right? It doesn't match your mental representation of what should be going on in that situation, right? So by studying those things, we can kind of gauge people's what kinds of information people are representing in their mental simulations. Past literature has shown that there's lots of things that people represent, color, etc. There's a little bit of debate about the role of object orientation and how well that's represented in people's mental simulations. Specifically, there's been some language differences in the literature. So one of the reasons why this is a nice candidate for a PSA study is we can extrapolate it over a whole bunch of languages. We have 16 languages that this task is currently translated for. And we can see if we can find these kinds of effects across languages, right? So that's the basics of Study 002. Study 002 is currently implemented in Open Sesame. So this study was, I think, the only PSA project that was actually being carried out via in-person data collection, where you go to the lab and sit down in front of a computer and an RA kind of walks you through the procedure and that kind of thing. As you might imagine, that plan has been slowed down a bit by the global pandemic. So Aaron mentioned we're currently in the process of working on switching 002 away from the Open Sesame platform and onto an online platform. So if you are a member of the 002 team, first of all, thank you. And second, we should have updates on moving that to the online platform here shortly. Generally, if you're just thinking logistically, what would it be like to run this in my lab? Like I said, as of right now, it's in-person data collection. The procedure takes about 20 minutes to run. The whole bundle takes about half an hour. And you can see the resources there on the bottom of the screen. This paper is, it does have a IPA, in principle acceptance, with Psychonomic Bulletin Review at the moment. So Aaron, if you would just want to hit the next slide and give me 003. So 003, and remember, if you decide to help out with this set of studies, you are running both of these. 003 is a very different research question. We did some pilot studies in the beginning of the process just to make sure that there was no contamination, and having such different research questions made for a nice opportunity to make sure that, you know, running people through multiple different tasks wasn't going to influence performance in a way that influenced the results. But the research question with 003 is looking at the gendered nature of prejudice. The idea here is, you know, when you ask people to think of a person, they're more likely to claim to picture a male. And that's true for other classes. Like if you say picture a black person, people tend to picture a black male, a white person, a white male, etc. So this project is looking at the gendered nature of prejudice across seven different social categories. So basically, we're recording people's attitudes about different groups. You can see the groups there on the screen. It's a pretty quick and easy Qualtrics survey. So the way that this one is implemented is via Qualtrics, and it takes about 10 minutes for participants to run through it. And the details for that project, you can check out the OSF site and the pre-registration there as well. So broadly, if you're interested in getting involved in that kind of project, we do have some opportunities still. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm the project monitor for that 002-003 bundle. And Aaron, you can hand it over to
Yay!
04.
Yes. So now it's Jordan's turn to talk about 04.
Hi. So 004 is a little bit different from other PSA studies. I'm the executive director of CRAPE, and a lot of you probably already know what that is, and you don't know how it's pronounced. It rhymes with grape. It's CRAPE. I don't care. It's fine. But everybody wants to know. So that's how it's pronounced. It's the Collaborative Replications and Education Project, and we select and then get materials together for students to run replications as part of their project. So like that time and energy that they spend putting forward projects doesn't go to waste on like data that doesn't really go anywhere, like ask any theoretically interesting questions or anything like that. And that's a whole several hours long talk too. So I'll try to keep this pretty short. Anyway, because of a lot of shared interests, CRAPE approached PSA about partnering up on something several years ago, in 1954. I don't know what year it is. And, you know, identified, yeah, we do have these shared interests. So let's do a partner project. And that is the True Belief Project. And so the way CRAPE picks which studies they're going to do is we look at journals from 3 years ago, and we look to see what's been the most cited paper since then. So we can replicate recent papers that have a lot of interest in them. But we primarily look for papers, and this limits a lot of what we can do. We primarily look for papers that are feasible for students to do. So can they do it in a course of a semester? This is going to sound weird if you look at the actual 004 study, but can the students do the statistics? More on that later. And then if there's a tiebreaker, we usually look for like what students will find the most interesting to look at. And then we have them run these studies at all these different sites, and they have to pre-register. They have to like walk through creating an OSF page. The next session that Aaron and I are in about this, like we will be looking at the manual that students look through for CRAPE. And then we write papers. We write a pooled analysis of all that data, and we've had 3 publications. PSA 004 is the first one that we did as a registered replication report. I don't know that I would do it this way again if I had a choice, because it became, it took a very long time, but it also became, I think, outside of the scope of what, not what students can handle, but like it's more difficult for them to be like in charge of the project from beginning to end, I think, because we have like more complicated statistics. But, you know, it is a registered replication report. So the nice thing is the people who are on it are at least guaranteed a publication as long as we do what we say we're going to do. There's a student first author on this. This is Braden Hall. He was my master's level student when we started this, and now he's in a PhD program. So I would say there are things, and if you want to talk to me about this one-on-one, I can definitely talk to you more about this, but there are things about it that I think are less student friendly than some other projects, mostly because like the paper itself, I think the topic is kind of interesting, but it's experimental philosophy. And so like, I've seen students wrap their head around it, but most of them don't want to. And then we also have like a centralized data collection that you don't have to use, but most people do. And this is on SocSci Survey. Sophia Weisgerber, if you ever meet her, give her a high five, because she is our, I don't know, savior. I don't know if that's like an okay word to use, but I'm going to use it. And she's been amazing running that. So the data collection might not even see the data collection or the coding or anything like that. And then the stats, again, are pretty difficult. However, there's this wonderful person named Erin Buchanan who has run all of the stats and all of the coding and has made everything reproducible on her SIPS project. And so I've been pointing people toward, like, use this as a model. And I think students will find it relatively easy to kind of work through. It's a good project if you do have students who are kind of getting into if you have students and you need to have them to a project and you want to be involved in the PSA. It's short. You can use social science survey, but you don't have to. We also have a Qualtrics file, I think, thanks to Alex Danvers, I'm pretty sure, is the one who wrote that, that we have been sharing with people. If I got the wrong person who did that, I'm so sorry. So if you have questions about it, let me know. If you have, like, sometimes when people send me questions, they're like, I'm so sorry, I've asked you so many questions. And I'm like, I could talk about crepe in my sleep. And apparently I sometimes have. So, I could talk about this stuff all day long. I love this stuff. But if you want more details on that, feel free to contact me. I'm also the project monitor for this project. So I have, like, a good sense of its progress. We will be collecting data through the end of 2020. That's this year? Yeah, 2020. Which means if you're going to be on board, you should probably do it, like, by October. But it goes online. It's like maybe 15 minutes. People end up, this is a separate problem, but people usually, we have 3 comprehension questions, and sometimes people have been not passing all 3 of them. And there are things like, in this story, what was Daryl staring at? Was it a squirrel or was it a prairie dog? And so it's like, so people have ended up losing a lot of data because of that. And let's see, what else do I need to tell you about 004? There is an onboarding survey that you can find, I think, at the PSA website. You can at least find it at the CRAPE link that's on that first line. We have 2 different onboarding, just because the projects are so different. We have 2 different onboarding Google Forms for regular CRAPE projects and then for the PSA project. The nice thing is, most of the CRAPE projects that we have run, well, the 3 that we've been able to publish, they've taken us at least 5 years. And that's actually, I think 1 took like 6. This, like, once we start data collection, I think we'll be doing data collection for like a year and a half. And even then, the extra half a year is because of, like, coronavirus and extending our deadline. So it is an accelerated CRAPE project, right? We get it done faster. We get this publication, we get this out there, but it's also designed for students. And we try to center the student experience as much as we can at every step, including giving them leadership roles, and scaffolding that experience for them. Yeah, so that's 004. What did I miss?
You can view the stuff. It's at AMPS.
Look at the things.
Yes, the register report is at AMPS, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on it. You think I'd know. All right. So it's at AMPS, and if you want to join, you can talk to Jordan. 5. Crystal, are you doing 5 or am I doing 5?
Sure, I can do 5.
Go for it.
So PSA 005 is stereotype threat. So if you're not familiar with stereotype threat theory, it's the idea that the possibility of confirming a negative stereotype about a group that you belong to provokes feelings of threat, and this feeling of threat actually leads people to underperform on the tasks that they feel like they're being stereotyped on. So obviously this has a lot of potential, particularly in, like, educational settings and stuff, particularly with minoritized groups. But a lot of the studies that are supporting it, they suffer from small samples and also, like, different operationalizations of what stereotype threat looks like. So this is a very large study that focuses on US-based labs recruiting Black participants. And it is testing all of these different kinds of operationalizations using an adaptive design that is I think almost done, or maybe it's already ready. And so it's set, it's good to go. And so we're hoping to have at least 50 labs. Right now we have about half of that. We're finishing up the first round, or an edit to the stage 1 registered report, which is linked down at the bottom. And basically the process is that there is an optional pre-survey that participants can take like around a week before they go to the in-person data collection, which is via Former or FarmR, and that takes about 45 minutes for participants to do. One thing I will say is I'm not a corresponding author on this. The folks that are in charge of it are Patrick Forsher, Valerie Jones-Taylor, Neil Lewis Jr., and Daniel, is it Cavanaro? Is that correct? And so those are the 4 people that are kind of leading this charge. But you don't have to have a very large Black population at your university. For instance, I'm a lab. We don't have a very large population at our university. They will collect data on your institution and see if that affects things. And then, so yeah, there's the Project OSF and the registered report submission, which is going through Nature Human Behavior, and it is almost ready to go. And my cat is bothering me, so I apologize. I think I'm done.
Yeah, my quick add to this is obviously this study pretty much requires people to be in person, even though the setup for the study can be online. The study itself needs to be in person, so it's going to be on hold until things are better. I don't want to say things are normal, but you can still join the project. It's just that it probably won't start anytime soon because we just don't even know what fall and spring look like. But all right, and then 6, which I forget. Is that Jordan again?
I think so.
Who's doing 6? I can do 6 if you want.
It's fine.
No, me? Okay, I'll do it. So I'm only on like a data collection lab on 6, but I will do my best here. It focuses on moral reasoning and the very famous trolley problem to think and adding this like cultural component to the trolley problem. So collecting data from many, many different cultures. That data collection is online via Qualtrics, and John Pratzko, I think I got that right, is a magician handling that, and I saw somewhere that they have about 150 labs, although I have been informed that they would love more because it suffers from the same data problems as O4, that people have to get the answers right for their data to be included, and we all know how hard that can be with freshmen. So they do have a registered report submission that you can check out on all of our OSF pages. And I don't remember where that one went. Jordan? Do you remember?
Oh, that's Nature Human Behavior.
As well. Cool. Did I represent 6 well enough here?
Yeah, I also, this is another good one that if you want to collect data with students, this is a good one to pick. Like, you could submit an IRB now and be ready to go at the start of the fall semester. I think their initial goal was to finish data collection at the end of October. I don't know if that's gonna be flexible, but I'm guessing I think most of our students have to have their data collection done by like the end of October-ish too, in order to start working on analysis and stuff like that. So I would really recommend checking that one out. It's run by Qualtrics. It can be linked up to like your school's Sona account if you have one, or whatnot. And the trolley problem is another one that's like really also kind of experimental philosophy, right? But like it's also really interesting to students too, and they enjoy talking about it. And there's a whole episode of The Good Place with the trolley problem in it, so you can show that in class, which I think is a huge bonus.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Jeremy, do you want to do this one? You want to me? Like, how do you feel about?
I can run through the
Okay.
COVID studies.
I think we're both like over this project at this point, but that is because.
So let's talk a little bit about the COVID rapid studies. I'll try to keep this one fairly brief, but so in response to the pandemic, we initiated sort of a special recruitment session where we got a bunch of COVID related research, and we had a ton of submissions. What was it, like 80 submissions or something like that? And slowly whittled that down to 3 through an internal review process and then through network voting. And these were the 3 that were eventually selected. So the COVID 001 is a study on loss gain framing and how that's related to COVID related messaging. So, how do you, if you frame the message about wearing your mask in terms of lives saved versus lives lost, those kinds of questions. And then 002 is looking at sort of managing the emotional consequences of COVID. COVID's been tough on just about everybody, increased isolation. So 002 is about teaching people strategies to manage their emotions in the context of the pandemic. And then 003 is another study on messaging. It's about sort of draws on self-determination theory and looks at how the effectiveness of different kinds of messaging, specifically regarding social distancing, varies depending on whether the message is framed in terms of a sort of empowering kind of message or a controlling kind of message, right? There's also a embedded general questionnaire that just asks people questions about their experiences with COVID that we're hoping can be of general scientific use. And so that's the project. We've got all 4 of those items running. Basically, you either, if you're a participant, you get thrown into a hopper when you click the link and you get some combination of these items. You always get the general questionnaire, and then you either get a combination of 1 and 3 or just 002 on its own, right? So data collection on that project is ongoing. We had actually thought that we might have it wrapped up by now, but the translation process has been it's taken a little bit longer than we thought. The implementation process has taken a little bit longer than we thought. One of the big takeaways from our experience with this is that these big mega studies, they happen on a slower time frame. And so this project is called COVID Rapid, but it's been rapid by PSA standards, definitely, but maybe not as rapidly as we had originally conceived it. And you can check out, there are a number of resources embedded in that one OSF page. So that page will fork you out to resources about each of the 3 projects and the general questionnaire. You can review the method that we use to recruit the studies. 002 has an in principle acceptance at nature human behavior, and the other 2 projects are waiting until data collection is over to submit their projects. Things you guys would add about COVID?
We are about to cross 10,000 participants. So awesome. I just pulled it up and looked. I just joke about being over this project because implementing it in 45 languages has been a lot. But we've done pretty well, and I'm really excited to have Max talk about some of that here in a few for the translation committee. Okay, so the other thing we're going to talk about just briefly here is that labs are giving credit, literally using credit guidelines. So generally, as a data participant lab, you're doing part of the data and then reviewing the paper. It's kind of the 2 minimum criteria, but there are lots of ways to get involved. So if you're at a university or not a university, for just an independent scientist who wants to help, there are lots of ways. So really, while most people think of the PSA as like, oh, I contribute to the data, the sample size, I want to add that there's a lot of places to plug in to help with the projects, especially if you have technical skills, because every project has had some sort of technical hiccup. So implementing all these languages, so translation's a big one, and we're always looking for new translators. And then texpertise, so to speak, of getting these studies to run correctly in the way that you want. So lots of places to plug in. If you're unfamiliar with credit, we've got the link here. But you will hopefully, not guarantee, but usually get some sort of research output from this. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to do is now I'm going to let Max talk, because he can also kind of plug into COVID here about how that process is run, but he's on the Translation and Cultural Diversity Committee and can tell you about what they're doing. Take it away, Max.
Hi, I'm Max, and as Erin said, I'm on the Translation and Cultural Diversity Committee. And we currently have about 10 active members and 2 assistant directors, Chuan Peng Hu and Ilka Talga. And broadly spoken, we have 3 main responsibilities. First, and that relates to what Erin just said about the COVID studies, we track the translation process of each PSA project. Our second responsibility is to increase the diversity of the PSA. Here, we focus on the cultural aspect of diversity. And third, we're supposed to introduce better translation standards, but that has proven harder than we thought. So about the first responsibility, I will just take you through the PSA-CR project a bit. So typically it works like this. You have the study accepted, and then people finalize their materials. And then one person, which I will call General Translation Coordinator, gets this big batch of English materials, and they have to get it in some sort of Google sheet so that people can translate it. But this General Translation Coordinator is just like an overview kind of person, and he or she manages a team of, in the PSA-CR study, it was 45 so-called language-wise coordinators. These are just people typically from participating labs and very often also undergraduate students who make sure that the translation into one specific language works out just fine. So at the top, a general translation coordinator who's like the big picture type of person, and then language-wise coordinators to make sure that one language works fine. Then these language-wise coordinators typically supervise a team of translators who just go through the PSA translation procedure. And I will come back to how that procedure works later. So a great way to get involved here is as a translator or as a language-wise coordinator. And this is particularly great for students because it's an easy way you can contribute with the expertise you have, mostly English and your native language. So you don't need any sort of statistical expertise or content knowledge to be able to contribute here and to earn co-authorship. For the second point, increasing cultural diversity, you have to look at what is usually an obstacle to participating in such large-scale studies. And sadly, that is quite often money. And researchers at universities outside of weird countries are often particularly low on funds, but their participation would be incredibly valuable to the PSA because it brings a non-weird perspective to the PSA and also gives the projects access to non-weird participant groups. Therefore, we are currently offering grants for participating labs to be able to collect data or to set up basic infrastructure such as the working internet in your lab. Our last responsibility, which is also related to the first responsibility, is to increase the quality of the translation process, to make sure that the materials translated by the PSA have the highest possible quality. And for that, we have developed quite an elaborate translation procedure, which consists of a forward translation, a backward translation, and 5 different quality control checks and integrations. Now, the purpose of this is to make the translation as high as a quality as possible. But the thing is, we actually don't know if this elaborate procedure does anything because it was never really tested. So we set up a project called the Meta Translation Project, in which we will compare multiple different translation procedures to determine which procedure works best and to provide a high-powered foundation for decision-making in future studies. Because we don't want to waste a lot of time with back translation, for example, if it doesn't add anything. And that's also something you can get involved again. We are recruiting people to help with the Meta Translation Project as translator, as coordinator, and even in the planning of the study. We have monthly meetings, and if that sounds like something you might be interested in, you can shoot me a private message here on Zoom or on the SIPS Slack channel. Another thing where we're still looking for input on is a hackathon at the PSA conference in September. So if you have any ideas or input for translation-related ideas for a hackathon, just shoot ahead and contact me or one of the two assistant directors. And now I believe Crystal will tell you about the community building and network expansion committee.
Thanks. Crystal?
Thanks. Yeah, it would help if I unmuted myself. Yes. So I am one of the assistant directors for the Community Building and Network Expansion Committee, or CBNEC, because it's kind of a mouthful, along with Natalia Dutra, who you might also be seeing around at SIPS as well. So please say hi to her. She's incredibly nice. So basically, we have two goals. One is community building, and one is network expansion. What do those two things look like? Network expansion is pretty easy. In terms of what it means, we're looking to expand the network of the PSA, particularly in areas where we don't have a lot of labs. So this, for us, if you looked at the map earlier, is mostly the global south, and then also a lot of Eastern Hemisphere countries, from Eastern Europe, kind of on east. So we're really hoping to expand our network. For us, it's both in terms of like where we can get data from, but also like who's leading projects. We're not kind of farming out psychology to like collect data from all these different labs all over. We also want to provide opportunities for folks from different areas of the world to be able to take the lead on something and to get that credit and that recognition. And then secondly, the community building aspect, which for us, I think has been like the hardest part with so many people involved, is we want to create opportunities for members to feel better integrated into the network in collaboration with other committees. So this may mean that we're collaborating with like the translation folks and the cultural diversity committee, or it could be starting conversations within the Slack for people to share their experiences, those kinds of things. So we're always looking for those kinds of opportunities for folks to kind of get to know one another, because we do have so many researchers in one area. It's nice or across different areas, it's nice to be able to kind of hear, how does research work in your area of the world, and what are some things that you focus on, what are you studying, those kinds of things. So there's been a lot of conversation around how different countries have been handling the pandemic and stuff like that in the Slack lately. So our current projects right now are to develop a coordinated outreach plan to really kind of intentionally go out. So far, our lab recruitment strategy has been kind of scattershot, and it's worked well so far, but we're really wanting to be more intentional about how we recruit. And then also we're hoping for a hackathon during our PSA conference later in the year too. So if you have ideas for that, you can either message me or Natalia, or if you join the Slack, we have a channel called Community Building in our PSA Slack. So we're always happy to have suggestions there too.
Thanks, dude. All right, I'll end. So I'm on the training committee, and for a while we've kind of been like floating around trying to figure out how the best to assist in projects, but we've got some new ideas. The idea is that we want to help give back to the community. So we help develop materials to provide training. We're working on developing a special call to partner with metapsychology to create like a publishing option for a lot of these materials and tutorials. And so one crazy idea I've had lately is we're thinking about how best can we give back on the studies that we're running. So a lot of people don't necessarily see all the things that happen in these committee meetings on like, let's convert this from an online or an in-person study to an online study, and that discussion. So can we provide that code and explain to labs, like, here's how this code works so that you could do this yourself. And one of my favorite sayings is that I love a good tutorial. So I want to help here really give a lot of these internal discussions back to folks. So here's how you set up a Qualtrics to run in 100 labs, something you've never thought about coordinating before. And so we'll have a talk of people at the PSA conference in September to kind of get some ideas too. But we're currently about to kind of start back up after taking a break so everyone could manage their lives. So if you are interested in that, you can send me a message and come and join us to talk about how to really take the things we've learned and give them back to labs. So last but not least, there's also a data methods committee, and I think I stuck this in here because they all are also looking for folks, run by Jessica Flake and Patrick Forsher, and they're doing a lot of really cool projects, especially organized around meta science. So the opening session talked about this a lot, and he's on that committee. So we're kind of plugged in a lot of places. So if you're interested in what our data procedures are and the data management plans, like how do you handle 10,000 participants, which was a big problem that we had when we started this COVID question of running such a large study and how we release that data, you can send a message to one of them. All right, so I
just want to chime in real quick.
And then Anna. Sorry.
It's just it's actually like the recruitment process closed like yesterday or on Friday, so it's not going on. Sorry, but we will probably.
Okay,
future,
well,
so.
at some point they'll be looking for people. I thought you still were. Sorry, but they are a good source of knowledge, and I know the meta science subcommittee is doing cool stuff. Apologies. So let me quick do a summary so we have some time for your questions, because I know we've got plenty of questions. And I want to say that we're a globally distributed network of labs, right? So we run research studies as our main goal, but I also want to really highlight that we do outreach and training, and we really want to improve what we can do for labs, especially in places that don't have access to the kinds of training and systems that maybe big schools do. Right? And so the main philosophical goal is to improve the psychological sciences by collecting more varied and large data sets, but also by giving that trickle back down into individual labs. Right? So you can get involved, join a study. There are 3, 2, 4, and 6 that are currently recruiting labs online that you might be able to join right now. You can join a committee, you can join Slack, you can donate, you can come to our conference, and then there's a whole collection of us here, and I think somebody said that Chris snuck in, so you can ask the man himself about your questions.
I think he snuck back out.
Oh, damn. Anyways, all right, so I'm going to hit stop on the recording, and would love to field questions from you guys, and I'm going to close Slack because it's getting on my nerves. But I'm happy to now just either type it in the chat or unmute yourself and just ask away.